right, welcome to ThreatTraq Essentials. I'm here this week with Mike Klepper. How are you, Mike?
Doing well. How are you?
Great. Let's talk about the stories you guys covered on ThreatTraq this week. The first one was about some urgent iPhone updates that were released by Apple. Tell me about them.
Yeah, there was a batch of about 40 critical updates that Apple released for a number of its products, many of which in fact impacted the iPhone. And certainly, while the good news is we haven't seen any exploitation per se out there in the wild, now that these things have been released, there's kind of a expectation that these are ultimately going to work their way into threat actors' toolkit. So it's best to start patching and get those patches applied as quickly as you can.
So you always want to keep your devices up to date, right? Is there some advice you want to give about that? Like, do we want to maybe have our devices set on automatic update?
Yeah, that's really a good way to do it. That way it kind of does the homework for you and just gives you a little prompt, and you're able to stay on top of it that way pretty easily.
Ganesh brought us a story about some research into ransomware with some interesting points to it. Even the price of ransomware may be going down.
Yeah, we've seen a number of data points over the past quarter when looked in comparison to the quarter previous to that, between Q1 and Q2 of 2021, at the average and median expense of a ransom that's being paid, trending downward a little bit. There's a number of factors that could be related to that, not the least of which threat actors kind of starting to run for the hills a little bit after the federal government of the United States taking more of a pointed interest in the activity. But any good movement, regardless of its reason, is certainly welcome in that area.
Any lessons that the average person can take away from a story like that?
From a enterprise perspective, it's always better not to get breached. One of the metrics cited in the report was that 80% of ransomware cases include the threat of data disclosure. So this is where the threat actors take your data and then threaten to release it to the internet if you don't actually pay the ransom, aside from the fact that you won't decrypt your machines. So certainly that is the public exposure there, and the fallout of that is certainly something that you would like to avoid if at all possible. So not only looking at making sure that your backups are tested and rigorously vetted and secured, but that you're taking additional steps to make sure that you are doing everything you can to prevent infection in the first place.
And finally, you brought us a story about the serious SAM bug in Windows 10. What's that all about?
Yeah, this is an issue that has been found to impact Windows 10 devices that have the VSS service, the shadow volume copy service enabled, all the way going back to 2018. And for systems that have this particular configuration, if a threat actor is able to get access to that machine either locally or remotely after gaining access to the network through RDP or something along those lines, they could potentially escalate privileges on that host to execute code with system-level permissions at that point, really being able to do anything that they want and fully compromise that host. At this point, there is no patch available for this, but Microsoft has issued a workaround that's a kind of a two-step process that they recommend, but there is some potential consequences of that workaround. So organizations are definitely going to want to test that out prior to pushing out that configuration broadly in the enterprise.
Well, thanks for all that great advice, Mike. Thank you all for watching. To keep up with great advice like this every week, just like and subscribe below. And if you want to take a deeper look into any of these stories, click on them and watch them in their entirety. We'll see you next time.